Alrighty, gentlemen. A 5, a 6, 5, 6, 7, 8. A 1, 2, 3. Ducky Join. Welcome to the Ducky Join podcast, where we all have a different conception of rhythm. My name is Scott McCrae.
Brandon Brown.
Oscar Teshi.
So yeah, gentlemen, what are we talking about today? What's on the noggin? Fresh and ripe.
Probably protest coronavirus, you know.
All the things that are happening in the world.
All the things that are happening in the world. Yeah, get all that out of the way. Yeah, it's very tragic. A lot of awful stuff happening right now, but a lot of good, positive movements and people togetherness and hopefully we come out okay at the end of this. But hopefully, it's important to have hope. Yeah, it's not for fools.
A lot of conflicting emotions, as you pointed out, with the timing of coronavirus and this movement. I think especially because as wonderful as it is, as the movement is happening right now and it's gained so much traction and it's really, people are seriously putting a push into changing the way our country works, and even around the world, since there's a lot of other countries that are joining. Racial injustice has been a thing people have been trying to protest for a long time and change for a long time, and it's possible and probable that the correlation between people staying inside for coronavirus and now putting so much effort into a movement happens to be right now, because it's bad timing, to put it simply. We're still in the midst of a pandemic and people are gathering in the largest of crowds, which is not to take away at all from the movement or people's desire to change, but it's questionable, for sure. Something people should think about. You know, could have happened much earlier, right?
Should have happened
much earlier.
Absolutely.
It's overdue. Yeah.
Yeah, a point that I'd like to make is that, like, the fact that Kobe Bryant's dead now, and in order to show support, or like to show support in place of him, Vanessa Bryant posted a picture of him wearing an I Can't Breathe shirt from when Eric Garner was killed by police in a very similar situation to George Floyd's killing. And it doesn't really make too much sense to me that this was already a movement in the exact same way for a situation that was almost the exact same, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And for that reason, it feels a little disingenuous. And like he said, it feels like it's more because of like pent up emotions from being stuck inside for so long, and not necessarily full-blown support. And it just could have happened earlier, should have happened earlier, but I'm glad that it is happening at some point.
Yeah, seriously, from at least from my experiences on social media, which I preface by saying that social media is not a defining input into my, like, how I make conclusions, but it's a relevant part of how the world is working, because you get to see what people are choosing to put out there, which in a way does express who they are, whether directly or indirectly. A lot of people have been putting out a lot of different ideas, which all should be taken into consideration, such as, at least with Corona, is that people still need to be safe. Like people are going out, and it is, in fact, doing the opposite of decreasing COVID cases. It's actually putting more COVID cases out there, which is just a fact because people are together.
Cases are rising in Oregon.
Yeah. And the thing is, that is, I think, something that people have accepted that for the movement, for the fact that this movement has gained traction and it has to continue. Or people are genuinely unaware that Corona is still a thing that exists. And there has to be that portion of people.
I don't even know. Because, I mean, like, people were protesting social distancing. Remember that?
Yeah.
Like, so, like, that alone kind of makes me feel like people are just like, I don't care about that. The movement is more important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, like, the movement of ending social distancing amidst a global pandemic was important enough for people to get out and protest in a big group. Yeah. So, like,
Right. It's like you're breaking one communist proposition to join the other, actually, because like your one was the government order, stay at home, but your other is your social responsibility towards your fellow man to progress the society and liberate individuals. So yeah, you have these conflicting. And I really think that's what it comes down to, is that you're, the people who are out right now are weighing their social responsibility against social responsibilities against the other, to keep each other safe in different ways. You know, so it's also a tough thing. But yeah, it needs to happen.
it does need to happen.
It's wild that it is happening now of all times, and 2020, what a year so far.
And it's interesting to see, as I've gone out and joined the protests and stuff like that, and there's a huge effort to do the most for keeping safe. When it comes to, there's free masks, free gloves, hand sanitizer every 5 feet that you can get, which does a lot. It doesn't do everything, obviously.
Fusing two social responsibilities.
There is also the responsibility of the individuals, you know, to partake in the safety of other people. That a majority of people wear masks, wear gloves, hand sanitizer, da. And you see those people out there who are not, and it's like, you know, as long as you recognize what you're doing.
Right. Just like you see a protester, you see people who are peaceful protesting, and you see people who are not. Right. It's like the same thing. Like everyone has. It's so weird that we have. So even when people think they're being socially responsible, they almost like are irresponsible in ways around that social responsibility. Like that's like I would say like violent protests are like probably like an irresponsible way to handle your like social responsibility. I'm going out and protesting but not wearing gloves, masks. That is like it's this contradictory like paradoxical thing. Like I'm going and helping my fellow man while hurting your fellow man. You know, like it's so yeah.
I'd also like to put forth the point that we talked about the other day. This year, the amount of black people that have been killed by the police is under 1,100. The amount of people that have died in America in the past 4 months because of COVID is over 100,000. So just weighing out those two things, as much of a problem as it is, as police brutality is, it's just not the time right now, which is why it should have happened earlier, in my opinion, or at least post-pandemic, because we're just going to keep adding to the death toll of the pandemic while trying to save a small portion of the population, and that just doesn't make sense ethically.
And the argument could be put out there, not I haven't thought about it enough to make this conclusion, obviously, but it's possible that people have this idea, or at least hope, that Corona will end one day, people will find a cure and it will go away. Whereas people think that I guess it's more prevalent to protest the end of racial injustice, because without doing something as a community, as a whole, that will continue to linger around.
Right.
But it's like you know, there's still obviously the blatant consequences of your actions.
You just compare death toll, and it's like, okay, but maybe we just wait until they find a cure, and then we protest racially.
And there's lots of ways, and people have been doing lots of things. The protest is more of a movement of solidarity amongst people, because the actual immediate effects are coming from things such as donating to certain organizations which promote black businesses and black success, or defunding police and like reform, you know, away from the militarization of the police and stuff like that. And like that's probably where the most change will come. And also awareness is a big thing because more and more people are realizing the seriousness of it and like understanding why it needs to change. But that's also something that comes and is beneficial from social media, is that even if people are posting to do the bare minimum, it's still raising awareness. And those two things alone can happen right now without large groups gathering, and it would still make a significant amount of difference.
100%. Especially since we all have during this time like transitioned our consciousnesses and our like debates and conversations so much to an online platform. I mean, the amount of like Zoom calls I see you do and like have maintained your relationships with people through that is like really cool, and it's like kind of reassuring that like I think a lot of change could be happening in that way. I think it's just that the only way we know, and maybe this is just like something very human, that like we almost need something physical sometimes for our anger. That like we need that like physical expression, and we
There
need
is
to
something
yell,
to be
we need
said
to
about
lash out and against
the man.
Against oppressors, like 100%.
It is. I mean, there is something to be said about the sense of pride. I say hesitantly, and like, you know, there is an overwhelming emotional sense to joining this physical movement,
Right.
of a crowd. Like walking out and seeing that many people marching for the same thing it's amazing in one sense. It's really cool to see, and it brings, you know, an inflacious sense of I guess joy or something.
Mm-hmm.
Something I can't describe yet. Coming change. So there's the immediate emotional aspect to that, but you know, again, there's the reality of the toll it's taking. So, complex situation. Also not that complex.
Yeah, that's all situations when you you can either choose the complex position or the the opposite. All right, we will be right back. 5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2, 3.
And we're back.
And we are back.
So a little continuation of where we were.
Well, let's jump to the next.
Since I've been called a bitch during the break, and continue with that.
A dead bitch. He's a dead bitch.
We're going to go.
Yeah, where are we moving next? What,
dangerous road of
what greener
social
pasture?
media. A lot of things to say about social media.
So many things to say about
Social media. This is my take on social media. Very, I guess, neutral standpoint, as with everything else.
Right.
Social media is very good at providing a platform for a large number of people to gather in one thing. The dangerous part of this is that once one idea or ideology gets traction, people start to blindly join in on that idea without thinking everything through, thinking about how it relates to the rest of society, the implications of simply saying you're a part of that ideology do to you and people around you. And also, just in general, social media is like probably the biggest instigator of fake news and a lot of things. It's a fake profile of you. It's a fake expression of your ideas. Not always, obviously, but it's a, what's the word I'm looking for? Like when you make it like a specialized, I guess. I'm looking for a different word than specialized. It's not. It's like catered, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you. It's almost what you want to be.
Yeah, it's like a catered intake of
Yeah, exactly.
the outside world.
And
and
you know,
also a filtered version of yourself. that
exactly,
you're
and it's
giving
a
to that.
responsive, and like that's not always bad, you know,
For the
because like
most part. For the most
For the most part,
Because there are definitely people who just have profiles in there themselves.
definitely, 100%.
Right.
But I think, more often than not, we do see that the social media self is a separate self from the self that people sustain in their day-to-day lives. That's like which
I'm speaking more on like behalf of like people who are like in the professional field, like
Yeah.
sportscasters and shit like that.
Mhm.
Their whole social media is a continuation of that. It's just
Persona.
continuing to sportscast.
yeah.
So it's not like creating a fake life, it's the life that they actually live.
Right.
And it's just a continuation of that life
That's interesting.
through social media. So not everyone is creating
Yeah.
some fake life
Yeah.
to promote to the world. Don't want to get too generalistic.
Definitely.
But like for the most part though.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And this is allowed, obviously, in this moment, more than a lot, for people to express support, which, you know, support is good. There's a debate on whether or not, you know, ingenuine support is helpful or hurtful to a movement.
Yeah.
So, and this is a big thing. Almost everyone is posting Black Lives Matter or respect for George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, the rest of all the other names that are out there of people who have been killed unjustly. So it's raising awareness for that. But these are people who, and this is personal, speaking from my experience, I know these people in a more personal basis, that they have either no concept of systemic racism as it is, and they do very little to educate themselves, or have done very little to educate themselves in the past. And even as a continuation, the support they show on social media is simply like, it's just that, it's just posting what everyone else is posting, and it's almost like there's no genuine support from them. It's not like they're showing, I've learned something, or I'm doing something to actually further this. It's like the equivalent of bandwagoning, I guess.
It strikes me as that idea that Jeter talks about in the talk with Peterson, that the recycling for people is like they get their one moral action that day, they did it, you know, then they can feel good about themselves. Like, you can post like, oh, hashtag Black Lives Matter on your thing, you know, and then that feels like you've checked your box, you've checked your societal, when in reality societal commitment, societal growth and progression is actually a much more difficult, much harder process than just going and posting something. It's conversations, it's reading, it's listening to people
Who disagree with you.
It's having arguments and some moments where you feel like an idiot, you know, and moments where you feel like you're going into territory that is unknown to you, and that's uncomfortable, but like it's much more beneficial in the long term than just saying, you know, just kind of bandwagon support, like you said. And even I would even say this was something we were talking about yesterday in terms of like using Hegel's thinking about using one method and applying it to like a diverse set of things, because that's really how it feels, isn't it? Is it like you take this one symbol that represents a diverse set of issues within a bunch of American systems, and then that is which we filter it through that symbol, and then we kind of lose track of the complex systems, and like that's actually benefits the complex systems working continuously against us, which I think is like, I think the biggest problem with social media right now, and like what you were talking about with like this kind of almost like ambiguous support, where it's like, okay, yeah, like Black Lives Matter, but what are you doing?
What are you saying? Also, like with the Black Lives Matter thing, it's like, I was thinking about this pretty in depth, is that people are saying, yes, like the hashtag Black Lives Matter is a symbol for lifting up the black community because it's been pushed down for so long, right? Or that's what they say. And they're like, yes, no shit, all lives matter, but not all lives are being, you know, oppressed. Yeah, exactly, all that. So it's like, yes, we're not disagreeing with that, we're simply focusing on the group that needs support, which is like, yeah, that's respect. But as you were saying, filtering through a lens, and as it goes into people blindly following ideologies, especially on social media, because it's a filtered reflection of your own ideas already. You have to do some work to find somebody with an opposite idea or a different idea or a new idea. Only thing you're mostly seeing on your page is people that agree with you or follow the same things that you do because you've chosen that, right? You've chosen who you follow and what your input is on social media. And the Black Lives Matter thing, people are filtering the entire problem or all the problems that exist that we're trying to solve, which is beyond much more than just the equity, of all people and lifting up Black lives. There is a bigger issue of power struggle in general in the world, and there's an issue of there's the police brutality issue, which does not only affect Black lives, and these complex issues, which also need to be focused on, I think, are gaining less traction because of how people are filtering their support. They're not talking about everything. They're talking about the one main thing that's being said on all social media
because that's what everybody is saying. Yeah, absolutely. That has been my biggest issue with the whole movement as it stands right now, is that it feels like a lot of people aren't necessarily really supporting just doing what they feel like everyone else is doing. And I mean, as much as it does contribute to the awareness that's being raised about the issue, I feel like it kind of negates the progress that's supposed to be being made. And then beyond that, adding on to what you said or what you were saying about the Black Lives Matter movement and them saying all lives matter and we're not going against that, we're saying we're focusing on Black lives. My biggest issue with that and the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole is that we focus on Black lives only when a white person takes that Black life, and that makes no sense, because number one, Black people are not the number one race that is killed by police every year. I don't think it ever has been, actually. It's normally white people. That's first of all. And most people don't even know that. They think that just because of how social media is so centered around that, that Black people are just constantly getting killed every single day by police. And it does happen often, but it happens to every race. And beyond that, Black people kill Black people more often than police kill Black people. And how often does the Black Lives Matter movement go out and protest or go out and raise awareness of a death when it's a Black person that killed another Black person? Not very often. I can remember one, maybe two occasions, and the first one that comes to mind is in New York when the young boy got killed. I can't remember his name, but he got killed by
Tamir Rice?
I think so. When it was gang violence, right?
I have no idea. I'm not very familiar with
I believe that's the situation, but that is one of the only situations that I can remember off the top of my head when the Black Lives Matter movement stepped out, and it wasn't because of a police officer or just a white person in general killing a Black person. And that makes no sense to me, because if you look at the numbers, they are so off-center.
I pulled up this stat right now that since 2017, 429 civilians have been killed by police, and 88 of them were Black.
88 of the 426? 88 of the 429. That is not even close to 50%. That's not even close to 25%. I mean, it's kind of close to 25%.
Closer,
but
yeah.
You understand my point. It's
For sure.
It's not. Yeah, it's white people every year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I knew that. But fucking, what was I gonna say? Yeah, it just really seems that in and of itself seems like the Black Lives Matter movement is not really doing what it should be doing. It's not promoting the importance of Black lives, it's almost
going against the killing of.
it's almost solely set up to go against white people, because it's only reacting to white people killing Black people, and that is happening far less often than Black people of any age also being killed by another Black person. Because for the most part, when a Black person's killed by a police officer or just a white person in general, it's not a little ass kid, it's a grown adult, and that doesn't make it any more right at all. But Black people of all ages are killed by other Black people because of shit like stray bullets and just drive-bys and shit like that. So it's like, come on now, I feel like we have to focus on Black people being killed as a whole if the Black Lives Matter movement is, number one, going to gain traction, really, and make any sort of change in Black lives.
Another thing I was reading recently was an interesting article on the concept of black on black violence, and the biggest thing, I think they got a little bit away from it, but from what I took is that black on black violence may not be an appropriate term simply because
people don't call it white on white violence.
exactly, like whatever, there's a whole reason behind it, and there's a whole reason why there is more violence in the Black community that stems back a long time. But regardless of that, the fact remains that, as you were saying earlier, is that it's a significant problem. Like the amount of deaths by Black killings of Black people it's an issue. It's not equal to the number of white people who kill white people or the number of Mexicans who kill Mexicans, as far as I'm concerned. I obviously haven't done too much research on it, but it's a serious issue. And so and this also goes kind of into what Zizek was talking about, and just simply an issue in general over the 21st century is identity politics, is that Black Lives Matter really promotes identity, and not just identity of Black people, but it's, and this is an American thing, culture, it's Black people against something else, which is true. Like there is that, but it's a double-edged sword in terms of the success of the Black community. It's diminishing the oppression that exists in the system, which is what people are fighting for, and it's also the education and the well-being of the communities where like issues are happening that have nothing to do with oppression or like white violence on them, because there's a lot of as you said, just Black communities holding down Black people, the situation in which you're in. Like a lot of different factors can go into you not succeeding that have nothing to do with immediate oppression.
Right.
Obviously the system is the way the system is, you are in your position because whatever, right? You can't change the past, right? You can only move forward.
Exactly.
Which is what a lot of people I think have a hard time understanding. It's like they're like, well, it's because of this. Well, it's like, yes, you have the choice to sit
and just acknowledge that it's because of that, or try to change that. Yeah, and I think that's a big problem also, is that we're not downplaying systemic oppression at all. We're not saying it doesn't exist. We acknowledge that, and so does the Black Lives Matter movement, but at the same time, they don't really do anything to try to end that systemic oppression. They try to end something that it has come about as a result of the systemic oppression. Police just killing Black people because they're Black is a result of systemic oppression. It's a result of Black people being forced into low-income neighborhoods, being forced into poverty, and being forced on to welfare and things of that nature. And then those types of situations lead to lives of crime, which lead to stigmas being placed on an entire population by other, or on an entire race by the other races and the race in power. And then that has led to police killing Black people. It's not just that police kill Black people and if we end that problem, then we're good now. It's the system as a whole, and if we end that, then as a result of ending that systemic oppression, all of those kind of branches would fall off, and then we'd be good.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a break. We will be right back. 5, 6,
Didn't
5,
you
6,
fully sit
7.
down? You said, did it change now though?
After you already checked it 2 seconds earlier.
Alright.
Oh,
We're back. We're back in action.
we're back. Yeah, we're back,
We're back.
everybody. So yeah, cool, but we're so sorry. We had a great discussion off camera. Didn't record it, but my closing remark on that discussion, just give you the conclusion. That I think social media does a really good job of the moment you have made up your mind about a given topic, it presents another one for you to make up your mind about. And I think where people get like lost in the whole fake news inertia and like, is that that's what it is. It's not necessarily fake news. It's the fact that you've been given another half truth that you don't like, that it's not fully sketched out. So you only have the bit of this truth, so you're doing a bit of imagination on your part, which takes time and takes human creativity and like human brain power. So I think you're already like invested in it, you know? Like I think there's a very purposeful ambiguity to media now that is an intelligent move if you're trying to control a bunch of worker bees, but you know, if you're trying to have a productive society, and like so, the thing my biggest contention with Jordan Peterson is he thinks the people at the top have the best interest at heart, and that having a more productive society that's solely productive and that we're more creative and we're benefiting each other is something that the people who are running things want, and it's not necessarily the thing that they don't want that. I think they want a very specific version of that, and I think that's where my contention is that their version of it I think is actually quite scary. I think is actually going to be because like at least in methods of control I think they've recognized that human beings are free. We have a capacity for will that is constantly overcoming and constantly turning against things, and I think the really brilliant maneuver is that they found a way to constantly give us small things to use that will against and revolt against, instead of looking at, like we were talking about earlier, like looking at the grander system and seeing the totality. They give us all these little pieces of the totality, and so we obscures the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And further, I think what you were saying about the half-truths that people have to see and witness on the media is that I think it goes into, especially with things like Twitter, you have a limited amount of space to say something, which has promoted very short messages. And the problem is that when you're presented with complex ideas, for your people, because you're not talking to somebody and you cannot give your inflections and you cannot express the reasons behind everything you say, and you have a limited amount of space to say it, you say your concluding statement or whatever, your sure statement. But for you to I guess, gain intellectual traction behind your idea, you would have to express, I guess, more evidence or more to it, because it's a complex issue. Like complex issues such as racism, power struggles, and stuff like that. You can't just simply tweet out a one-sentence thing and that be a defining statement about it.
Yeah, and then also on the like subject of half-truths through social media and just media in general, it brings to mind a specific situation. When I still use Twitter, there was a post that was like super anti-Trump, and I'm not for Trump or anything, but it was super anti-Trump and saying that he wanted to get rid of Indigenous Peoples Day in place of a new holiday that was I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was something celebrating like American citizens or maybe soldiers, but it was like a new holiday basically, and it was the same day as Indigenous Peoples Day, and so the tweet said something along the lines of like, I cannot believe you would do this. Why would you get rid of Indigenous Peoples Day? This is the last straw. Like, haven't Native Americans been through enough? And things along those lines, right? And so I saw that and I went, wow, like that's kind of crazy, you know? He just got rid of Indigenous Peoples Day. Like, what kind of what? Right? And then I clicked the article, read through it, or no, it wasn't the article. It was a link to the like doctrine that was kind of stating the foundation of this new holiday, and the date that it was going to be on just so happened to be Indigenous Peoples Day as well. And then I looked up the creation of this new holiday, and nowhere does it say Indigenous Peoples Day does not exist, because that's not a thing that's happening. He wasn't getting rid of Indigenous Peoples Day. He was adding a new holiday. He could have added it on another day, and that's not, I won't argue against that, but like that was fake news in the sense that that person did not do the research into what was actually happening, just assumed that because they did not like Donald Trump, of course, or I'm assuming, and because Donald Trump made a decision, that it had to be bad. And that wasn't the case. It maybe wasn't the best way to go about it. Like I said, could have been on a different day, could have been the next day, like whatever. But it didn't do anything bad. Indigenous Peoples Day still exists and still occurred and was celebrated. So that was fake news. And I feel like when you're going onto social media and receiving these half-truths, because that was a prime example of a half-truth, it's your job to unpack these things and not just take what you see and what people say on social media at face value
as a God-given
and
statement.
just like that's just the truth. Because that if you met me in person and I just told you something, are you just gonna automatically believe me and that I'm just telling you the truth? If you don't know me, probably not. So why on social media don't you apply that same like wariness to just accepting things as fact? And I feel like it's because you see other people putting their support behind something, and then you feel like, okay, so clearly this is the truth, gotta support. You can't do that. You need to unpack these things and make sure that you know what you're putting your support behind. Otherwise, you're not really doing yourself justice.
And I think that, that's a big thing, like clickbait being a thing. Just like a huge title saying something, a definitive statement, and then there's an article.
That's not even necessarily clickbait. That's just ignorance.
Yeah.
Doing the research yourself.
But things such as that and clickbait and things that highlight a very specific statement that is for a very specific agenda, and its relation to sensationalism on social media is a big problem. And I'd agree with you in that, is that it's the idea of that half-truth or that clickbait is that it's relying on you not to do the research, and it's relying on you to make that your initial feeling of what you see be your driving factor in your response to it, or your or how you act upon it, right? And that's a big problem, is that people are falling into this sensationalism instead of using logic to think about things through entirely. Definitely.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like hearing that has me thinking about this concept Zizek talks about in Sublime Objective Ideology, about how because he's writing from the 80s, obviously, so I mean he was before social media, so the things he's talking about are like commodities and stuff like that, and that when we buy into commodities, we buy into this fantasy that constructs our social reality. And I think that has been more true than ever with social media. And then I really like when you guys are saying like, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have the fantasy. We just need people who are properly educated to be able to interrogate the fantasy, unpack it, and better inform their social reality with that fantasy. Because it's like the same thing with, which I hate that this has become the thing that like, with art and stuff like that, if you allowed just like movies and just like music to be that fantasy to be your social reality, you'd be a fucking nut job. Like you'd be fucking insane if you were like, oh yes, I want to fall in love just like the movies. You'd be a fucking serial killer.
Yeah. But that was me. My depiction of relationship for a long time as a child was entirely based on.
But as a child,
you
of course, yes.
But I am a serial killer. Yes.
Right. We know. Top one. But you interrogated that fantasy. That was a childish inclination to believe and I think...
Well, the very first time it didn't work out as it did in the movie, I was like, wait a second.
Right.
The fuck?
Well, so it's like this. I actually use this. You guys ever watch How I Met Your Mother growing up?
Yeah, of course.
If you followed how those people treated each other and treated your friends like that, you would have no friends.
It was so toxic.
They are so psychotic and like so like interfering with each other's business. They're always like manipulative and like lying to each other and playing horrible pranks on each other that are actually just like sabotaging their entire life plans. And Friends is a similar way too. I mean, it's very but on that note, I think there's something to be learned there that we separate. We say, oh, that's in the realm of fantasy. That is a TV show. But when we go into social media, we say, this is someone giving me who they are.
Yeah, it's so weird that there's that selective segregation of like belief and faith. Like, why does social media just like people just have too much faith in social media? Yeah, and I don't understand why.
Why don't you look at it in the same way that it's like entertainment?
Exactly.
In some sense, it is, and because you go onto social media to be
entertain yourself.
You don't read news for
bored
fun.
and then you go onto social media. You're not getting on social media to read news. You're getting on social media probably to see some funny videos, some funny tweets, some whatever the fuck.
Right.
So like, why when you happen to stumble upon some news in social media, is that just fucking fact? And like you have so much belief in that. I don't understand that.
I'm picturing like almost like a church now. Like social media has this church where there's like all this fun stuff. There's like bouncy houses and there's like, but then there's Jesus on the cross.
Just so that you don't fucking really pay attention to Jesus on the cross.
Right. Like,
all the fun stuff directs your attention away, but you're in church.
You're still in church. Like there's still that lingering presence of like, feel guilty about this, but have entertainment, have your fun, and then it becomes this like conglomerate. It becomes this weird conglomerate where you are mixing a tweet from your favorite comedian with whatever your ideology is, which is kind of poisonous. You know, it poisons
Maybe that's
both
the perfection
spheres.
of social media, is that it's
As a controlling force.
as a controlling force, as a completely
Just envelops.
you no longer can separate entertainment from critical news or input in your life, and so that and almost this is what he was saying, is that people.
What was that?
GJ, was saying that people no longer take important news at face value as it is important as it is, because, and this might go in, it probably goes into the fact that social media is also entertainment, is that you see something such as Black Lives Matter. Even if you are somebody now who is finally educating yourself about systemic oppression, you are not feeling the full weight of that issue. And I'm not talking about because you're not black or anything like that. You can feel the weight of a situation regardless of anything, as long as you think about it. Okay. I'm being, I'm
You
not
can only
being-
go so far.
Yes. But, fuck, what was I saying?
G-Jack.
News, taking news at face
Oh
value.
yeah, and so like people almost, it almost hurts like movements or things that should be talked about and should be serious. It almost takes away from the seriousness of it in a societal picture, because there are the number of people who take it seriously and are fighting for it and doing real things as a serious reaction to it, and then there's people who are using it as entertainment value, as something for people to be entertained by the fact that you now support something.
Like all the people who posted the black screen shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was for entirely
That's pure
entertainment.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's the most selfish shit I've ever heard in terms of like supporting a cause. What the fuck are you doing for support by posting a black screen? Nigga, what? What?
Yeah.
That
The
makes
point I
no
wanted to make
sense.
earlier, and this, please feel free to disagree with me, because this is, I have not gone through the entire thinking of this. People saying you cannot say something because of who you are. You cannot understand racism because you are white. There is truth to that. There is, maybe you have not experienced racism in your life on a personal level, on an anecdotal level, but for someone to say that you are unaware of how systemic racism is in whatever country in America, say for example, and that you don't understand the effects that it has had on people is ignorant, I think, in some sense, because I don't know, because like I don't know what I'm saying. Like intelligence is a thing I think people should be more focused on, right? If you've read articles and books from people who have both a knowledge of systemic racism and the personal effects, have felt the personal effects of it, and you read their stories, right? And you familiarize yourself with that. And you read articles on how systemic oppression has worked in the past and stuff. You can have an understanding of how it works. You can be very intelligent on how it works. You can have a lot to say about how it can change for the better. You may not be able to speak for the community which is being oppressed, which I think is a big thing, obviously.
Yeah.
You cannot speak for them as to how, they should do things or how, like specific things, obviously, but like you can still have an understanding and have an opinion to give. And I'm not sure if it's a big deal or if it's a small deal, but like it feels like people almost disregard what you have to say when you try and go into something like that based on who you are.
Definitely, and I think the fear is, I mean, because you guys remember that episode of Atlanta with the white guy who's like explaining black culture to Donald Glover. Like, I think that's the fear. I think the ultimate fear is that people will read that, like a white person will read all these texts and stuff like that, and then ultimately become like the
like they
That's
become
not,
the
that's not the
mouthpiece.
fear. That's
What happens?
no,
I
it's
guess,
not.
or-
No. That's not the fear. That's what's not okay. No one
Yeah.
said that you can't educate yourself on these
Right.
things and have an opinion on these things and have something to say about these things. Perhaps people who are super entrenched in, or not super, but like actually entrenched in the culture because they are black, may not accept your opinion. But why do you care who accepts your opinion? You know what I mean? Get
Yeah.
your opinion out there. That's what's important.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter who accepts your opinion. You got it out there.
Mhm.
And you know how you feel, and it doesn't matter if someone accepts that you, or like feels that you can feel that way. You know what I mean? Oh fuck.
Closing
What's
statement?
up?
Our closing statement, I mean,
Yeah, I was just gonna say like it's just that you can't cross the line into telling black people how they should feel or how
Absolutely.
they feel when things like that happen, or like you said, how they should react or what the next step should be and stuff like that, because you don't know how it feels. And that's a fact and is not ignorant to say at all.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how it feels, you can't know how it feels. Just like I can never know how it feels to be white. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I can study as much as I want, and there's plenty of history from white people, you know what I mean? But I will never know how it feels to be white because I will never have that perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's just that's the only problem that there is in there, in my perspective. And
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't tell people how they should feel, but
absolutely
be
educate
confident
yourself.
in your education of it
Yeah.
and your
And
awareness of it.
do not worry about how people react to your opinion,
Especially
or
in today's PC culture.
or the validity of your opinion, because that doesn't matter. That's like getting to a level of like selfishness and
Yeah.
like, oh, but they didn't accept me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like that doesn't matter.
Closing statement from
Thank you guys so much.
Ducky Joy.